Courage is the most important skill or trait you can pass on to your child. It literally influences every single decision they make. Confidence grows when perfection isn't the goal, but progress is the goal. You don't need to create the perfect environment, you just need to be the steady presence. Welcome back to another group coaching call. Today we've got some great questions that have been pre-submitted, so let's get stuck into it. So, first question from Mrs. Patel. My son has ADHD and school feels like a battlefield every single day. Forgotten books, unfinished tasks, constant corrections. How do I help him feel confident when he's always behind? Big challenge for a lot of parents with kids who have ADHD. So the first thing is to separate your child from the challenge itself. Try to say to them, your brain works differently, not wrongly. So often ADHD is considered a disorder, or a child might feel like they've been labeled with something that makes them different, or that they've done something wrong. But really it needs to be completely reframed as something that can be a superpower that could actually support them and help them. So separating them from the challenge itself is really, really important, right? They are not the things that they are doing wrong. They are not the hurried forgetfulness. You know, they have different challenges, but it is not them. First thing. The next thing is to praise micro wins. So when I say praise micro wins, I mean try and pick up on the things they did really well. Like if they remembered their water bottle, you say, well done for remembering that, right? It's so easy when you're dealing with a child who has ADHD not to think about the things that they might struggle with every day, and they actually need praise to re-encourage a lot of those habits, a lot of the actions they've done, and they'll start to feel better about themselves as well, right? They won't feel forgetful. One of the biggest issues with kids with ADHD is they start getting labeled other things. So they might be called disruptive or naughty or bad, right? Now, so many times I've had kids with ADHD come to the Warrior Academy, and I have to rewire, first of all, maybe a decade of incorrect language that their parents and the teachers and everyone around them's used, where they have been called bad or badly behaved or disruptive, and after a while they start to believe that, and once they believe that themselves, they then move into that identity. I've been called a bad kid for so long. I am a bad kid, therefore that's how I act, right? And so we reshape that entirely. A good example there is I've had a child many times come here with that same challenges, and I've reframed it to, as soon as they've come in, seeing that energy and saying, wow, you'd be a great leader, you're a great leader, and I've had them come to the front of the class and teach and use that energy and that power to actually control the class, to teach a class, to use their voice, rather than trying to get them to constantly be quiet and to shrink. I do the complete opposite, and I try and get them to leverage that, and then you can start saying, okay, but as a leader, sometimes I need you at the front of the class teaching something bravely, loudly, confidently, and sometimes I need you to sit still, quietly, meditating or waiting for your next chance to do it. And so what you're doing is you're playing to their strengths, but also teaching them emotional composure. So these things are really key. So that's all about language, right? So try never to say to your child, you're forgetful, or to get them to identify with those things, because it will just make things worse. Always praising those micro wins goes such a long way. Working with their strengths really, really helps. Try to build momentum in short bursts. So, 10 minutes of focus can actually really help. A movement break can really help. You've got to approach things like homework differently with a child with ADHD. You can't just say, sit down, do your homework, and then you'll be able to play. The second you do that, their brain just might not necessarily be in the right frame of mind to actually do some deep work. And so if you can do things through movement, there are certain things like they can sit on a Bocce ball, or they can sit on a spiky ball, which gives them a kind of sensory experience while they're doing it. It actually takes their mind off the work they're doing straight away. So they don't feel they need to leave. They can actually sit there while working. Try to create 5 to 10 minute breaks every 5 to 10 minutes if you need to, and then slowly reduce them until they find it easier to get into a flow. Often when you have a child with ADHD, if they're really interested in something, they can hyperfocus. So then it's about finding things to let them hyperfocus. However, double-edged sword, sometimes they hyperfocus so much, they might forget to eat or to go to the toilet. This is the reality with kids with ADHD. So you've got to actually find that balance, right, of trying to encourage them to do the difficult things which they really don't want to do because their brain can't focus, and then making sure they don't go too deep on something that they forget their basic needs. So it is a challenge as a parent, but just having the awareness is one of the best things you can do. The next thing you can do is use visual steps instead of long verbal instructions. So your child won't necessarily pick up on long verbal lectures or long verbal instructions. And sometimes if you can make things visual, a chart or a checklist, that goes such a long way because it suddenly brings it to life, makes it more interactive, it gamifies the whole experience for them. So doing that really helps. And most importantly, and I want this to really hit home, if your child has ADHD, they're probably going to a school where, if they're lucky, they're really supported, but that's not the case in most. Because schools typically have a one-size-fits-all approach, and your kid is probably going to be in a situation where they don't necessarily feel successful at school. They will feel that they're constantly corrected, that they haven't been enough. And so make the home feel like their successful place. Make them feel successful at home. And you can do that. You can manufacture that by the way that you give them things that play to their strengths. You can be the ultimate mentor or teacher for your child with ADHD if you approach this in the right way. Great question. Okay, Mr. Green asked, this is another ADHD question. I've got two today. Mr. Green asked, my daughter has ADHD and gets overwhelmed by instructions, even simple ones. It turns into frustration for both of us. So what can I do? So when you've got a child with ADHD, don't give them loads of instructions at once. Give them just one instruction at a time. For instance, if you've got a 5-year-old son and he needs to get ready for school, don't say to him, get changed, get your bag, put your socks on, put your school shoes on, right? That is already too much. Instead, the first thing you might say is, put your sock on, your left sock on. Once they've done that, put your right sock on. Right? My son's got ADHD, and if I was to say to him, and it literally goes like this, go and put your shoes on. He will walk the 10 meters in the direction of his shoes, and his brain will forget why he's walking there. So by the time he's on his way to get the shoes, something more exciting has grabbed his attention, and he's already forgotten what he needs to do. Now, if you didn't know that neurologically his brain was working in a different way, that might cause you to be really stressed as a parent and to try and hurry things along. Instead, you've got to approach it with calm, acceptance, and understanding and compassion. And so instead, one of the quick things I do is I'll say, go and get your shoes on. And I'll say, as he's on the way to get his shoes on, I'll say to him, shoes, 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 shoes. So I'm literally reminding him, so his brain doesn't tune out. And it might sound silly, but if you've got a child with ADHD, try it. You'll be blown away because their brains literally work differently. They go from that place of understanding exactly what you said, that one instruction, great, but by the time they get there, it's gone. Something more exciting has come up. So reminding them with a verbal cue as they're about to do whatever task you need to do really helps. Use movement to reset focus. We've spoken a little bit about movement before, but even if it's a small task, just a quick stretch, can really help. Even if it's just 5 press-ups or just a couple of squat jumps or whatever it is, can just quickly give them a reset, let out some of that extra tension, and then they can focus again. Co-regulation is really good. I often talk about grounding techniques like breathing together. If you've got a child that's frustrated or struggling or overwhelmed, in particular, Mr. Green, with your question, it was about feeling overwhelmed, then doing 3 deep breaths in and out together can really, really help. Give them that sense of grounding and center them so that frustration leaves. The thing is with ADHD, it needs gentler pacing, not more hurried energy. And so, I really feel sorry for ADHD kids who are constantly hurried and pushed. And it's difficult because in order to get them to do something, you almost need to create this environment where you do need to count down from 5 or 10 for everything you're doing in order for them to actually get something done. But ultimately, parents with kids who have ADHD just need more patience. And it's such a challenging thing. But if you have more patience and more composure and more compassion, then the whole experience of raising a child with ADHD becomes so much easier. And I can tell you that from experience. Next question, Mrs. Thompson. My child is terrified of making mistakes. If they can't be perfect, they don't even want to try. How do I break this cycle? So try to make making mistakes normal. And one of the best ways to do that is actually to share your own mistakes. So many parents try to be completely perfect in the eyes of their kids. But it's actually really key that they, especially as they get older, they see that you've made mistakes and you admit to those mistakes or failures or setbacks, and then you share what those mistakes were. But then more importantly, how you overcame them and what helped, right? Because they need to learn, understand that adults make mistakes too. Adults experience failure. Because as a kid, try and picture yourself in your kid's life and in their own mindset. You look up to adults so much, you never actually think adults make mistakes, but they do. And the more you realize that parents and adults are human and make mistakes as a child, the more likely you are to accept that's a normal part of growth and development, and the less terrified you are going to be of making your own mistakes. So that's the fundamental. Basically, making mistakes normal by sharing your own. Always try to praise bravery over accuracy. So I believe that courage is the most important skill or trait you can pass on to your child. It literally influences every single decision they make. If you want to give your child confidence, give them courage. Courage is like this muscle that needs constant training to grow and develop. But courage isn't just the big things like, stepping into the ring and doing a professional fight or doing a big sporting event or, public speaking or whatever it is. Courage is the small things. It's growing up into an adult that's confident in setting their boundaries and not choosing a toxic relationship. It's growing up into an adult who applies for the jobs or the work that they want. It's growing up an adult that seeks more from life by the small things that they do every day. It's growing up into a young person that isn't influenced by peer pressure. That all comes down to courage. So how do you develop courage? Well, you've got to look at the friction points of courage. How does a parent prevent a child from developing courage? Well, they jump in too quickly before they experience failure. They use limiting language around what's possible for a child. We've spoken a little bit about language with ADHD. It's very, very similar. You'll find that a lot of parents bubble wrap their kids. They don't let them leave their comfort zone in the first place. These things, these friction points to courage are all the reasons your child won't develop bravery. But once they do show that bravery and show that courage, make sure you really praise the courage. If your kids went to their first ever martial arts competition, one of the things you could say to them is, even if they didn't win, I'm so impressed in how brave you were. I know at the Warrior Academy, we don't give out participation medals. We don't believe in it. We actually think that it robs kids of the experience of failure, which is actually really important. However, we do praise bravery, the courage for competing in the first place. And we do that not with medals, but by giving every student a t-shirt from the 3 different competitions we do. And so praising bravery and courage is so key because it makes them more likely to do it again, right? It's a bit like praising effort, but there's a slight difference. You're praising the feeling of doing something uncomfortable. And that's really key. That is what courage is. And if you can praise their courage, they're more likely to repeat the things that they find challenging. The next thing is to reframe effort as identity. So saying things like, I've noticed that you are someone that keeps trying even when things are difficult. You're now speaking courage into their hearts and minds, right? By using language carefully, using the right words, the right language to actually inspire them. And just remember that confidence grows when perfection isn't the goal, but progress is the goal. So it's putting all that emphasis and focus and energy on effort and learning and growth and development and not the end result. We don't want your child to become performative where they're not happy unless they've actually achieved the outcome or whatever it is that they feel would make you happy in terms of achieving a certain result, an exam or a sporting event or whatever it is. If they know deep down that you are going to be so pleased with them just by trying in the first place, they are going to be repeating these actions time and time again. It's going to be serving them long term. Okay, Mr. Farouk has asked, my son is brilliant, but he quits everything. Football, piano, clubs, he's excited at first, then gives up when it gets hard. How do I teach my son grit? Really good question. The first thing I would say is when your son tries something new, it's really important that you like we said in the last questions, you praise that, right? Trying is one of the first things. Leaving your comfort zone, trying something new. But it doesn't sound like your son's got that problem. He enjoys trying new things. So we need to shift the focus a little bit to sticking to new things. So try and have a 1 month rule, right? Where your son might try something new and you'll say, look, we're going to do this for 1 month. We're not going to do this for one class. We're going to do football for 1 month. We're going to do art class for 1 month. And we have a 1 month rule. What you'll then find is that they are starting to learn about commitment, because what typically happens, if you look at when someone tries something new, there's this excitement and emotional energy where they're like, this is fantastic, this is new, this is novel. So they're excited by the novelty. And then they start to realize, actually, this is a bit harder than I thought. The motivation starts dipping, and it's at this point your son will quit. Because after that novelty, the realization, it's like a J curve, the novelty of something new, the realization that this is actually quite difficult, and then the mastery of that thing or the basic skills within that new activity. Your son is dipping here. But this is the first lesson, this is the second or third lesson. This is by the fourth or fifth lesson, where they grasp the basics and they actually feel competent. So you have to try and mentor them to get to the other side of this kind of chasm, right? This ditch. And the way you do that is you try and encourage them to say, look, we're going to stick at this for 1 month, and I know that the first class is going to be exciting. Then you might find the third class to be quite challenging, but the fourth or fifth class, you're going to really enjoy it because you're going to get it. If you frame that and you mentor them correctly, they're going to stick at something. Try to ask them what parts became difficult. What is it specifically they found difficult? Because a lot of the time, a child will try something new, and if they don't master it very quickly, they actually are worried about failure, so they run away from it, right? When the reality is they need to face it. What specifically did they find hard? Maybe it's a martial arts class, and they found the press-ups really hard. Okay, so we're going to spend the next week just doing 5 press-ups every night together, and we're going to show your instructor that you can do it next week, right? My daughter does gymnastics, and I had this conversation with her. She said, I don't like gymnastics anymore. I sat with her and I said, what is it you don't like about it? And I said to her, what do you find difficult? And I know that she's that character where she really likes to show her best, show her best self. She doesn't like to experience failure too much. She wants to perform at the highest ability she's got. And so when she realized she couldn't do this one thing within the gymnastics class, which was a bridge exercise where you basically I won't do it right now, you basically put your feet there and your hands behind your back and you stretch your stomach up in the sky. It's quite a challenging physical movement for a young person to do. You need quite a lot of flexibility and shoulder strength. But the reality there is she struggled with that. And so I sat down with her and I said, this is the thing you find difficult. She said, yes. I said, is that maybe why you don't want to go back? And she said, yes. So I said, look, we're going to do 10 seconds of that every day, right? And so the way I did that is every day I did 10 seconds with her. I counted those 10 seconds, but I made the seconds slightly slower each day. So by day 7, she was basically doing 20 seconds. And then I timed her and I showed her and said, you can now do a 20, 30 second bridge. Whereas earlier in the week, she could only do 5 to 10 seconds max. So within 7 days, she saw that progress. She was excited to go back to gymnastics and show the instructor what she could do. And within the first minute of being there, she was in a bridge position showing off what she'd been practicing at home. The key thing here is what she had learned from that. She had learned that when something feels difficult, dive into it, don't run away from it, and double down on that difficult thing. Then come back and be excited to show the improvement. That is a key lesson for your child. So I hope that helps Mr. Farouk on how to teach grit, how to teach consistency, and how to mentor your child through that typical motivational curve when they try something new and novel. Okay, last question here from Mrs. Clark. My child gets so frustrated when things don't go exactly the way they imagined. A plan changes, a friend cancels, a game doesn't go their way. It becomes a big emotional storm. How do I help them handle life's unpredictability? So the first thing you need to do is validate the feeling, right? It's okay to feel disappointed. If you validate the feeling, you're going to cement that emotional bond with your child. They're more likely to speak to you about things, and they won't shy away from difficult conversations. That's super important before they become a teenager. The next thing is to teach a grounding phrase. So, new plan, same strength. We do difficult things, or we do hard things, right? It's having a phrase that they understand, means that they haven't failed, but they've experienced something uncomfortable. You're going to reset and you're going to come back stronger. Find a phrase that you can use to do that. The next thing is to introduce a small change to their plan to help them actually become more flexible. One of the issues that a lot of kids in this situation have is things didn't go their way with their original plan. So they don't want to try anything else anymore, that's it. But instead, you need to try and teach them flexibility. Sometimes their plan isn't perfect, and it's not likely to be perfect from the beginning. They need that fluidity with their plan. So teaching them that plans change, right? And teaching them when they change and how to move with it and be more fluid and flexible is going to really help them from a mindset point of view. The next thing is to praise recovery. So if you notice them do something really well, after you could see they were visibly frustrated, saying something like, you calmed down really quickly, that's amazing. That's resilience. Really, your child's ability to experience stress, regulate their emotions and calm down, and then get back out there and do it again, is literally resilience. Emotional regulation is literally resilience. For me, especially when it comes to young people, emotional regulation or resilience is all about how quickly your child can feel uncomfortable, pause, reset, recover, and get back out there. It's the speed from uncomfortability to reset to performing again. That is a measurement of resilience, and that all comes down to your child's emotional regulation. So teaching them these skills like being flexible with their plan, resetting, regrounding, using the words and the language around them to actually inspire them to repeat the actions and to change their mindset around setbacks, that is super key. So, I hope that certainly helps there, Mrs. Clark. Right, that is the end of our questions. I feel like today's questions really showed something powerful about modern parenting. Every child, whether they're navigating ADHD, perfectionism, frustration, or emotional sensitivity, is basically facing a world that moves very quickly, that feels unpredictable and often overwhelms them. But here's the truth. Resilience isn't built by eliminating the struggle. It's built by supporting them through the struggle. So when we talked about ADHD, we made sure we talked about it not as a flaw, but as a different operating system. Your child could use ADHD as their superpower, but it's a double-edged sword and can also make things very difficult for them. So it's becoming the mentor they need because they may not be getting that support at school. It's about making the home the most successful place for them because that might not be their experience at school where they're spending 6 to 8 hours every day. These children with ADHD aren't too much or not enough. They simply need a calmer rhythm and a clear structure to feel successful. We talked about perfectionism, that silent weight that so many kids carry. They're not scared of hard work, they're scared of not being good enough, and there's a massive difference. Confidence forms when they learn that mistakes are allowed and mistakes are recoverable. We talked about frustration, we talked about emotional storms. Children don't just fall apart because they're dramatic, they fall apart because they don't yet have the tools to handle disappointment properly. And as a parent, you're teaching those tools every single time you respond with steadiness instead of frustration. We talked about adaptability, which is a skill that will really define their teenage years and adulthood. Plans change, people disappoint, and life shifts. Children learn adaptability when we guide them through those moments gently and consistently. So, here is your reminder. You don't need to create the perfect environment. You don't need to solve every single problem instantly, and you don't need to stop every meltdown or prevent every disappointment. You just need to be the steady presence that helps them return to calm. Your child learns courage by watching how you handle chaos as their parent, and they learn resilience by facing discomfort with you beside them. They learn confidence when they see you believe in them while they're still learning to believe in themselves. So, remember, you're doing better than you think, and your child is becoming stronger than they realize every single day. If you're watching this, make sure you click subscribe, hit the notifications, and don't miss another episode. Every single week, I'm bringing you live coaching calls just like this with real problems that parents face all the time.